strong.
Chapter 391, Revocation of Ban. The reasons for the three disciples at Daoshenko to worship were very simple. There was even a necessity behind this simplicity. Dao Sheng did not tell Ye Fuxian that he had not closed his eyes for 3 months to write on the stone wall. The hand holding the knife pierced the skin and bled. He fell and stood up again and again, but finally got his chance. He was blown up, and then passed out instantly. The old man stared at him for 3 months and gave him some fruit when he woke up hungry. Then he had a great cottage disciple. He didn't tell Ye Fuxian that the people chasing Ji Hui were extraordinarily strong at the time, but the teacher took them out unharmed. He also didn't tell Ye Fuxian that after Jiu Dongyu and Zhu Hui met, he saw the pure and beautiful Kotang disciples when he was young, but he let the thunder to crush his body, and practiced almost masochistically. He asked the teacher why he was so tormenting the students and questioned Du's way of teaching them. At that time, Jiu Dongyu and Zhu Hui had fought each other and were beaten by Zhu Hui. He was still dissatisfied and asked Zhu Hui if he couldn't practice like that. Zhu Hui smiled and asked him, "Are you protecting me?" Jiu Dongyu, who was seriously injured, responded, "Okay, I'm protecting you." So there's everything behind. Unfortunately, to this day, Jiu Dongyu still couldn't win over Zhu Hui. Of course, all of this was in the past, except for themselves. Outsiders would never know how they felt about the teacher and how they felt about each other. Ellipsis, ellipsis, ellipsis. Donghang started the rough sea. On this day in the eastern wasteland, a major event had not occurred in hundreds of years. The Qin dynasty was overthrown, and the top figures from the Flying Cloud sect and the suspended Qin palace were killed in Tianshan and Shushan. Mr. Name Kotang Du and his disciple Ye Fuxian once again stirred the world. In the Tianshan Mountains, Ye Fuxian controls the meaning of the Tianshan Mountains, and the bell that controls the rings of the Tianshan Mountains suppresses everything. On the Mountain of Books, Master Du Duo displayed his sage-level strength and great fingerprints, and everything was swept away. Everyone knows that an era has ended, and the Qin dynasty that once ruled the world has been completely turned into the dust of history. After receiving the news, there were many people in the Donghang world who went to Shushan for pilgrimage. In this battle, the thatched hut was sealed. Some are excited, some are afraid. The joy was naturally the disciples of the academy, the disciples of the sacred mountain of the sword, and the people of the Mizuki sect. Fear is the strength of the Qin dynasty's alliance. This time, the top figures fell, and most of them were still alive. But in the thatched hut, Mr. Du himself didn't seem too excited, nor was he proud of his performance in Shushan. After the mountain, the old man lay quietly on the rock drinking. "Teacher." Dao Sheng's voice came, then Dao Sheng and Ye Fuxian and others came here. There are also moon elves, besides them. He came to meet Master Du, but it was not easy to interfere alone. Swordmaster returned with them. "Master," Mochizuki bowed. Mr. Du nodded. "Is something wrong? Can Junior follow Master's practice?" Fairy Mochizuki slumped. The scene about Shushan had a huge impact on him. Is that the true power of the wise world? He wanted to break through the current world and needed the guidance of famous masters. Master Du was undoubtedly the most suitable. "I'm lazy and don't plan on accepting any more disciples." Master Du sat down, shaking his head with a smile. Fairy Mochizuki was a little lost, but then relieved. How could a foreigner like Master Du accept his students at will? "Master, what is the current situation in Donghanging? What should I do about Wezong?" Fairy Wangu asked. If Shu Shan wanted to unite Donghang, she would be willing to support him. Although he had no choice, but this time, he was sincere. Currently in the academy, he felt that the academy was different from other places. Although the disciples also have conflicts and frictions, they still practice spiritually, while the academy preaches and teaches. Unlike Zongmen, apart from spiritual practice, there are always many interesting things. Naturally, various tasks are also required in the academy, but the human heart is relatively simple and pure. "Come on," said Master Du with a smile, "I've always wanted to change things up, but in the end I couldn't do anything about it. With Lord Prestige's prestige today, those who raise their hands and shout to the east will gather to respond. What else can't be done?" Mochizuki Fairy asked. "I overthrew the Qin dynasty with my strength and then shouted and united the eastern wasteland. It is no different from the Qin dynasty. If I am not in the eastern wasteland a stronger, it is reincarnation. The most difficult thing to change in the world is the human heart." "And the idea?" Mr. Du shook his head. "Idea, sir?" Mochizuki asked. "The Zongmen family is no longer dominated by world spiritual practices. Academies and other spiritual practices are being replaced by it. Without utilitarianism, the world no longer blesses itself, preaches and teaches, and inherits from generation to generation. Mr. Do looked at the moon elf. Fairy Mochizuki was stunned, and then gave Master Do a little admiration, saying, "Of course, Master Meng's concept can provide a better environment for practitioners in the world. However, this seems to be an impossible vision. Some people have greed, desire, and strong people naturally want to open up ancestors and families. When people who agree with your idea gradually stand at the top, it can be realized naturally." Master Do said with a smile, and Mochizuki Fairy suddenly thought of his students. Mochizuki's heart shook and suddenly understood. There was nothing wrong with Do's words. When one of his disciples stood at the peak of the eastern wasteland, put his ideas into practice, opened a missionary class like an academy, and continued to train new people who agreed with their ideas. Criticizing such figures is always at the peak, and the influence of the Zongman family will naturally continue to weaken. Preaching places like the academy are sacred places in the world. I understand. Mochizuki bowed, and then backed away, leaving a weak wave in his heart. Is this the mysterious Mr. Do in the eyes of the world? Their Dosheng always stood and listened quietly, Do said to the moon elf while he didn't talk to them. Ye Fusion heard it, but he didn't think too much. He didn't have such a high level of consciousness. He did not have the ideals of the great world. The teacher said that it was too far from him. How are the people in Desert A? Do asked, his eyes on Ye Fusion. Let's go, will the sages in Wangzhou enter Donghang? Ye Fusion asked. The teacher is a wise man, and the prohibitions are there. As long as the sage does not enter Donghang, there is nothing to be afraid of. Yes. Master Do nodded, Ye Fusion froze, the teacher said with certainty. Seeing his expression, Master Do smiled and said, "Is the attraction of the ruins of the two emperors as simple as you think? If it is not the prohibition of the great emperor, the powerful forces of the desolate countries will set foot in Tianshan first, but he is afraid to leave the great emperor in Tianshan. On a whim, no one dared to sneak into Tianshan, but now that you have it, can the people of the lonely state give up?" Do said with a smile, "The vastness of the Holy Land, the emperor rules the world, how will he always keep an eye on the eastern region, and one day when someone disappears in the eastern region, will it cause the emperor's attention to fail?" Ye Fusion smiled bitterly. He naturally understood the meaning of teacher. In the past, Donghang didn't let the desert powerhouse waste things, and the desert city naturally obeyed the ban secretly, but now it's different. Then I have been in Shushan, Ye Fusion muttered. Since there is a ban in place, no one dares to do it properly. Actually, I didn't tell you a word just now. Master Do said again after hearing Ye Fusion's words. What is it? Ye Fusion was curious. When Emperor Donghang issued the ban, the complete ban was that sages should not enter the eastern lands. If there were sages in the eastern lands, the ban would be lifted automatically. Master Do looked at Ye Fusion. Ye Fusion looked at Mr. Do briefly, blinked, then his face turned black, staring at Mr. Do with a grudge. This means that Lord Do has shown the power of the Sage Kingdom, so the ban doesn't exist. A strong country can directly set foot in the east. So after getting the news, there will be more strong people setting foot in the eastern desert in the Badlands. Ye Fusion said. Yes. Master Do nodded solemnly, Ye Fusion's face turned black. In Tianshan, why does he not dare to touch the people of the desolate state? Because he is afraid that he will be madly retaliated by the desolate statesmen, killing those related to him, and as long as he does not offend people to death, the high-ranking characters that high, the goal is only he is the only one who will only find it when counting. But now that the ban on the eastern wasteland was lifted, the powerful nation could directly enter the eastern wasteland and set foot in Shushan. Are there some things you can't hide if you want to hide? Teacher, what should I do? Ye Fusion asked. How would I know? The old man muttered, then lay down and continued drinking. This old bastard. Ye Fusion scolded in his heart, and he was still drinking. Teacher, Ye Fusion shouted. Don't worry, it won't let you influence others. Do said lazily, if it doesn't work, I will hand you over. Ye Fusion regrets it, is it too late to disperse guidance? Chapter 392, Dong Hazong Disaster. Dong Huazong, host of Huazong and his wife announced their resignation and disbanded Zongmen. Dong Huazong's disciples dispersed last night. The land that once dreamed of being the first case in the eastern wasteland became extremely desolate. There were only a few people who didn't leave today, such as Lu Nanshan and Qianshan Mu. After Qianshan Mu found out what happened in Tianshan, his heart became very complicated. If his wife Kim Meng died in the hands of Ye Fuxian, his brother Hua Kangking let go of Ye Fuxian. Because of the relationship between Hua Kangking, Ye Fuxian let go of his teacher in Tianshan. And madam, however, if Hua Kangking killed Ye Fuxian on Tianshan mountain, what would be the end? Win. Impossible. They already knew the news about Shushan. Master Kotangdu, a sage, was destined to fail from the start. This is a meaningless battle. In this battle, there was no damage to Kotang, except for the Keen King. Dropping Shushan to death, I am afraid that Mr. Du will not take action so far. Go. At this point, Hua Zongju's companion looked at Qian Shanmu, who was kneeling on the ground, and said. Qian Shan tucked his head in, then stood up and turned to leave. After he left, Dong Hazong, there was only the pair of Hua Zongju, Lu Nanshan and Hua Kangking. Later, you take Kangking from the ancient world. After Qian Shanmu left, Hua Zongju said to Lu Nanshan. Brother-in-law took Kangking away. Lu Nanshan shook his head. Later, is there no point in being a teacher? Hua Zongju took a bit of seriousness. Lu Nanshan still stood there quietly. Mother-in-law. Time is running out, you want to kill King. Hua Zongju rebuked. I won't go. Hua Kangking stood to the side. Teacher, brother-in-law, we were wrong from the start. Perhaps Master Du already knows everything. He has no intention of hegemonizing the Eastern famine. He only teaches his students calmly and tries to make them strong, but I am thinking about strength Donghang, and now I understand that everything is just a delusion, and even the power of Donghang has no meaning in front of a very strong force. Lu Nanshan looked at his teacher and sister-in-law and said, then he knelt down to the two and said, Teacher, sister-in-law, I want to be your disciple in the next life. After all, he stood up and walked to Hua Kangking, only to see her extending her hand, trying to touch a pure and neat face, but in the end her hand was lowered, just like before, but she was relieved of her heart, smiling opening, King, live well. After saying this, Lu Nanshan resolutely turned around and walked towards Dong Hazong. Seeing her back, Hua Kangking had tears in her eyes. I have no regrets in my life, it is perfect, except that the battle with Jiu Dongyu is considered an episode in life, but it is not a shame to be able to lose to that person in the hut. Lu Nanshan's voice came, his voice. The body suddenly accelerated, turning into a ray of light that rushed towards Dong Hazong. At this time, many people outside Dong Hazong was staring here, watching Dong Hazong's every move, and in a restaurant in the distance, a group of people wrapped up the whole restaurant. Outside the restaurant, there is a dazzling golden blackbird, bathing in the fire. In the restaurant, a young man sat there drinking and looking in the direction Dong Hazong was. The youth's eyes seemed to contain the will of the flames. The drinking movements are relaxed, as if enjoying. Cultivating on his own was a very difficult thing, requiring immense patience and perseverance, therefore, apart from practicing, he always knew how to enjoy pleasure outside of practice. The young man was naturally the strongest man in Ophio Ozu. He did not leave the eastern wasteland. After evacuating Tianshan, he wanted to go directly to the academy, but hearing that there were sages in Shushan, they would not rush to do so. Let people return to the desert, he himself brought people to Dong Hazong. Because of the beauty in Tianshan mountain, he almost lost his life and couldn't kill Ye Fuxian for a while, but what about his beauty? I can let it go. At this time, Duao saw a figure walking towards Dong Hazong in the distance, fighting with the man. This man was bathed in bright fire, and his soul appeared. It was a three-legged Jinwu, letting it reveal a touch. Different colors. He said, ask him if he will submit to me, but bring him into the practice of the holy fire. Okay. A strong man stepped out and walked towards him, but seeing a figure in the distance killed him head-on. A terrible sun appeared behind him, and he burned the people in the place directly. Kill right up to the restaurant. Look for death, you don't have to wait any longer, go find someone, accept him, don't kill Mercy. Duao said coldly, and the people next to him stepped out of the restaurant in the direction of Dong Hazong. In the distance, many people watched the scene harshly. Dong's suzerain announced his resignation and disbanded suzerain, but he did not expect that the people who had not retired. The powerful people of the remote country directly killed Dongwa Suzeong without any reason or reason. Ellipsis. Of course, what happened to Dong Hazong Kotang would not know it, and Ye Fuxian did not expect it. In Shushan, the disciples of Du, Dean Xiao, and Kotang were all there, and even a few mountain heads and fairies were here. This is Ye Fuxian's first time meeting the dean of the academy. It is a little pale, but he has a bit of immortality in his body, at least the temperament is more than the old man. Ye Fuxian heard that the teacher and the dean were at odds, but now it seems that the facts are not as imagined. At the very least, teacher and Dean Seo were having a good chat at the moment. Moreover, the conversation was about the future of campus, about my brother. Thinking clearly, everything is free, there is no need to think about my thoughts, Du said to Dao Sheng. You shut up. Dean Seo looked at Mr. Du with a sharp look. Teacher, I am willing, Dao Sheng nodded. Okay, Dean Seo said with an excited expression, and laughed. Okay, you don't look like your teacher. Brother, speak well. Master Du looked at Dean Seo with a smile, revealing familiar eyes. It's not as good as people. Then I will call everyone and announce it to the academy tomorrow. Dean Seo said, only feeling relaxed for a while, the burden will finally be lowered, and someone will take his place, and it is a very suitable candidate. Yes. Dao Sheng nodded, and Ye Fusion looked at the scene with a slight wave in his heart. I didn't expect that from tomorrow onwards, sir, the Dean of the Academy. Since you promised, I will leave it to you in the future. Du said as he looked at Dao Sheng, looking a little serious. Dao Sheng nodded seriously, and said, I will put the teacher's idea into practice. In the future, will the Holy Sword Mountain also be merged into the academy together? Mochizuki next to him asked. I created Doshin Mountain, and I teach my students the concept of a college. Now I will let Doshin Mountain students choose to stay, Dosheng replied. Can I stay? The fairy suddenly smiled and suddenly said. Everyone's eyes looked a little surprised, and looked at the moon elf. What does the fairy mean? Blade Saint asked. Staying in the academy to train, I will incorporate the Wezong ancestor into the academy and push another mountain, such as Wangu Mountain. Fairy Wangu said with a smile. Even if Mr. Du and Dean Seo both showed surprise, the Moon Fairy is a suzerain, and she is willing to become the mountain leader in the academy. Moreover, Wang Wezong's integration into the academy was tantamount to violating the will of Wang Wezong's ancestor. I agree. A loud voice sounded, and everyone looked away, and saw Ye Fusion raising his hand in agreement. Everyone looked at Hua Sheyu next to Ye Fusion. Hua Sheyu blushed slightly, lowered her head slightly, kicked Ye Fusion. What is this person worried about? No one speaks for you, said Master Du lightly. Ye Fusion glared at him in annoyance, but thinking that Wang Wezong would join the academy in the future, it wouldn't be too beautiful. Wang Wezong, I'm afraid it won't be easy for you to persuade others. Dao Sheng said, Wang Wezong is not the same as Mount Dao Sheng. Dao Sheng Mountain was created by him. Whether it's the Wezong sect or the academy, it's all for spiritual practice. If you have the same tone in the academy, you can pass on it too, or even better. If they don't agree, I will stay and lead the Wezong sect. I choose to stay myself, and I will surrender to the position of king. Wang Yu Fairy said, and after the storm in the last conversation with Master Du, she changed her state of mind to make such a decision. Mount Thatched Hut let you guys, said Mr. Du. Master Du. Mochizuki's fairy eyes froze and gave them a mountain of thatched huts. In the future, there will only be an academy, and there will be no more thatched huts. Du said with a smile. Ye Fusion seemed to feel something, and his heart was a little heavy. The thatched hut in the legendary land of the Eastern Wasteland, will it disappear? Master Du. At this time, a voice came from one direction of Shushan, and people turned their eyes and looked in one direction. Seo frowned. How could it be the entrance to the Hoshan ancient mountains? There was a strong breath there, and Mr. Du immediately sensed what was happening there. He frowned and stood up. Then people saw two figures rushing to the side. Behind them, there were many strong men hunting down. Bang! The terrifying fire hit the body of the figure in front of him, and the figure suddenly trembled, and the palm was pushed forward, pushing the other person's body towards Mr. Du and the others. Proud. Dean Seo opened his mouth coldly, and every figure came out, and they saw a beautiful figure flying towards them. It was Hua Kunking. At this moment, Hua Kunking turned violently, and an invisible force pushed her back. He looked at his mother, and the corners of his eyes filled with tears. At this time, a divine bird, the three-legged Jinwu, appeared to his mother, Madame Yu Xiao. Burning his body frantically. Madame Yu Xiao's body burned violently, and her breathing continued to weaken. He looked at the academy and said, I know that I have offended a lot in the past, and I am willing to pay it back in the next life. I only hope that my husband can save my daughter King Kang's life. Madame Yu Xiao said, her burning body half kneeling in the void, looking very quiet. Now this is a desert, only Master Du can save his daughter, he will escape here. Chapter 393, Eastern Wasteland 1. The academy looked at Mrs. Yu Xiao knelt in the void, bathed in fire, all moving. Former Madame Yu Xiao was also a very famous woman in the Eastern Wasteland. She later married the ruler of China, but the ending was very sad. Regardless of the previous relationship, many people in the academy felt grief. This scene is too tragic. With the palm of the fairy, the meaning of ice fell on Mrs. Yusio, tried to extinguish the fire that was burning on his body. However, Wu Jinwu's ***** flame in his body also contains a hint of sage. It can't be extinguished. His body gradually becomes illusory. He endures a terrible pain, and only looks at Master Du. Mother. Hua Kangking saw her mother's tragic voice was gloomy, and her pure face was now full of tears. Hey. Mr. Du sighed. He knew that Mrs. Yusio has not been saved. At this moment, he was only maintaining his breath with his own strength so that his body would not scatter. Master Du said, "Go ahead." "Thank you very much, Madam Yu." Madam Yusio nodded at Master Du, and then his body disappeared in the flames and disappeared in no time. Mother. Hua Kangking was so depressed that she wanted to go forward, but seeing the moon fairy jade stretched out, an invisible wind spell wrapped around her body, and brought her to her side. Ye Fuxian did not expect that Tianshan would end up like this after letting the Chinese ruler and his wife. He looked coldly at the holy fire strongman and the young figure behind the three-legged Jinwu. On Tianshan Mountain, Duo wanted to attack Hua Kangking and was stopped by her. How could he never think about it? Instead of hiding his evil deeds, Tianhuo Dwarf hid things, but instead rushed to fight Hua Kangking. This great power disciple from the desert has no shame. Or he doesn't care about the attitude of the world, but just does what he wants, even if he is evil. Even if the Qin dynasty destroyed the Liu kingdom, at least he was looking for an excuse. Brave, this woman is what we want, and I look forward to giving her to me. I saw an old man bathed in fire stepping forward, his body filled with wise will, and his breath was extremely arrogant. It was he who previously attacked Madame Yusio and killed Madame Yusio. The people in the academy looked at each other. Even though he said he was brave, he didn't have the slightest admiration in his eyes. They all knew that holy fire could do evil, so naturally there was no good or evil thoughts. This is because there are sages at the academy. They will have a little fear, otherwise, I am afraid that I can't be bothered to talk and just kill them. The last time the flames and other troops came to the academy, but they were clearly remembered, how proud the people of the barren countries came. Down. A dull voice came out of Du's mouth, and the strong man of the flames in the void looked at Master Du. Even if he was a sage figure in the eastern wasteland, it did not seem to amaze him. Since the predecessors are not accepted, let's go. Behind Jinwu 3 feet, Duao said lightly. He glanced at Ye Fuxian with a slight sneer. Ye Fuxian also looked at him from Duo's eyes. He saw a touch of contempt and ridicule. In Tianshan, how arrogant Ye Fuxian is to borrow the meaning of Tianshan, torture and kill strong people, and use the bell to shake the barren strong people. But now that there was a sage in Donghang, the ban was lifted. He wanted to see, how would Ye Fuxian be so arrogant? The withdrawal of the people from Torchfire was not a worry for Duo. When the sages of Torchfire in the desolate state arrive, no matter Ye Fuxian or Hua Kangking, they will be in the bag. Crazy. Dean Xiao of the academy said coldly, very angry, but impossible. Although the teacher and brother can look after each other, the teacher and brother must be considerate for the students in the academy. And others are not clear, but he knows that his sister is in Shushan and can't stay long. By the time the ban was lifted, many things had already been destroyed. Everyone looked at Hua Kangking, seeing the crying face, many people couldn't stand it. The people of the Holy Fire religion immediately chased and killed the academy. It is conceivable that the Donghazong ending today does not need to be asked at all. Take him to rest. Master Du looked at Hua Kangking Road, and sighed slightly. Okay, Mochizuki nodded, took Hua Kangking away, and the others also dispersed. Kotang's disciples were still there. Du shook his head and said, if you are a weapon of weapons, if you are not bound by the rules, you can only control the desires of humanity based on their conscience. After all, he's gone too. Ye Fuxian looked at the back of the teacher. He somewhat understands the ideals of a teacher. This is a great power in a deserted state. When he set foot in the eastern desert, there was no sense of admiration, and he did not hide his desires in his heart or care for others. It is cruel to kill his family to rob someone. Armed with a sharp weapon, commit suicide. Because nothing is tied. There was a rumor that Hua Kangking, one of the 3 great beauties in the eastern wasteland, had a pure nature and did not know the dangers of the world. Her beauty is pure, because she does not need to be involved in the world to be born and nurtured. But he, the purest of heart, had endured the most heinous crime in the world, which was utterly ridiculous. 4 brothers, is there a pen and paper? Ye Fuxian asked Zuai, the 4th brother. Yes. Zhu Ye nodded, then took out the pen and paper from his body, and asked, what will master do? Copy the score. Ye Fusion spoke, then walked to the stone table, took out a paper, and carved a sheet of music on it. Several Zhu Hui were curious and came to Ye Fusion's side. Here he is. Zhu Hui whispered. Okioku. Ye Fusion smiled. What? Zhu Hui asked. Whoever comes to the academy in the desert state, I will send him the piano sheet music. Ye Fusion's voice was very dull, and everyone looked at him, looking at Ye Fusion. Okiocho, world famous 10 songs, fixed emperor, Ye Fusion, should it be sent easily? Whoever came, you sent all of them? Zhu Hui asked. Well, whoever comes, give it their all. Ye Fusion nodded solemnly. No, it must be said to lend them, I will let them repay in the future. Herr Fusion, this is the army that is coming to Shushan. This compromise may be powerless. Relax, Okio is not easy to learn. I will leave a copy of the academy in the academy to supply the academy. If there is a big power from the deserted country to come to the academy, all is given. Ye Fusion laughed. Hua Kangking on the piano. Her achievements are also very high, but she can't play this song. Ye Fusion was able to play because he resonated with the will of the 2 emperors on Tianshan Mountain and directly underwent the baptism of the song. The last part of the song was played by the emperor's intent. He can confirm that even strong people in the desert state get. With Ukyo, it is not easy to learn, or even impossible. Zhu Hui smiled, and stepped forward and rubbed Ye Fusion's head. The younger sister is really different, the older sister likes you more and more. Ye Fusion blinked and glanced at brother 3. See you, it's okay. Zhu Hui smiled and revealed Hua Jiu. If he likes to take it, Hua Jiu said softly. Ye Fusion looked at Hua Jiu sadly. Must he be so cruel? Ellipsis ellipsis ellipsis. Today was a special day for the academy. Dinsio of the academy called Shushan disciple, Dosheng called Dosheng mountain disciple, and Fairy Wangu was also called Wangu sect. A large crowd gathered in the vast expanse of Shushan, waiting for the lineup of figures. Dinsio, Dao Sheng, Zhu Gehui, Jiu Dongyu, Mayor of Geishan, Moon Fairy, and the others all stood in front of the high ground and looked at the academy. Many people heard the faint wind, knew what news President Xiao would announce today, and even, at the feet of Shushan at this time, countless figures had gathered, looking at this sacred Shushan, a sacred place in the eastern desert. News of what happened in Donghazong had spread. The strong of the abandoned country has run rampant and angered many people. Now Hua Kangking will be kept in Shushan. If it wasn't Master Du, Hua Kangking would have been left behind. Troops taken immediately. However, can the academy stop those strong people from the desert country? From today, Blade Shengshan, join the academy. Blade Shengshan disciples go to the academy to train. If you don't want to, you can go down the mountain. The Sword Saint's voice was uploaded from Shushan. Many of his hearts trembled at it. From today, Wang Wezong joins the academy. Wang Wezong's students go to the academy to train, and those who don't want to can also go down the mountain. Wang Yuexian's voice also came. From today onwards, the position of Dean of the Academy will be ruled by Dao Sheng, and Fairy Mochizuki will be Vice President of the Academy, helping Dao Sheng to organize the Academy, indoctrinate the East, and preach. Many people looked at the stairs in front of them. Today, the top 3 figures in the Eastern Wasteland announced heavy news at the same time. Since then, Sword Saint and Mochizuki Fairy took over the Academy. Under the steps of Mount Shushan, several lines appeared, divided into 3 main ranks. Many people exclaimed that 3 powerful factions emerged from the Qiankyu Temple, Dao Dezong, and Ji family. The strength of the entire Donghang came together, and the top 3 forces came to worship the mountain. Although Du had no idea of a unified Donghang, in fact, Donghang now belonged to the academy. The 3 forces went up the stairs and came to the top of Shushan. The old monk came to congratulate the academy, hoping that the holy saint would not forget his true heart. The abbot of Qiankyu Temple folded his arms and fell towards the saint. Master is polite, and he must obey his teachings. Tao Mozong came to congratulate the campus. The Ji family came to congratulate the campus. The other 2 major powers congratulated. Among the crowd, Dao Demon Sorcerer Jiu Biu smiled and looked at Ye Fusion. Who could have thought of this day when the ancient and ancient worlds first met? In the distance, the wind and clouds roared, and the strong people of Shushan turned their eyes and looked into the distance, and saw many people coming from far away in the clouds and slowly approaching Shushan. Chapter 394, Zero Mirage. In Shushan, the strongest characters in all of Donghang gathered together, their eyes looked far away with a serious look. Come on. Many people secretly said that the people at the feet of Shushan also saw the void, and those who descended from the clouds and fog in Shushan. The strong people of the desolate country came to Shushan. Even if the strongest forces in the eastern wasteland gathered, it was not enough to see Donghang just united. How will the academy solve this crisis? Could it be Ye Fusion? The people of the eastern wasteland now understood what this barren strong man was for. Because of Ye Fusion, he set foot on the peak of Tianshan mountain and got the ruins of the two emperors. He can control the meaning of Tianshan mountain. It is said that he got one of the top 10 famous songs in the world. The strong in the void descended and divided into 4 camps, the strong on earth, Nanshanfu, Holy Fire, and Taishuan Mountain. Duao, Nanfang Nanyu, Chuchang and Halan were all there. They were the first to control the news in Donghang, so they came the fastest, and the other forces in the barren country might not have received the news so quickly. The eyes of Duao, Nanfang, Nanyu and others fell on Shushan Ye Fusion, with coldness in their eyes. Beside them, there were big people from their army, strong people of the sage level. This time, they had to see how arrogant Ye Fusion was. They remembered everything that happened in Tianshan. I heard that there is a virtue in Donghang. I don't know who is sacred. At this time, in the direction of Nanshanfu, a strong man in front of Nanfeng wore a beautiful robe, and spoke in a loud voice towards Shushan. When the emperor issued a ban, there were no sages in the eastern wasteland. If people of this level appeared, even a desolate country would definitely get news, although the East Wasteland had little contact with the outside world. However, the troops in Wangzhou will still pay attention to Dongwangwang, otherwise they will not know that the bell is ringing in Tianshan. However, there were sages in the Eastern Wasteland, and they had not received any news until now. Obviously, the other party deliberately concealed his identity and fled from the East, or else the people of this level would not have to stay in the East. The people in the mountains are not enough. On the mountain, a lazy voice came. It was Master Du's voice, and he did not appear beside Dao Sheng and Dean Xiao. You guys, why did that happen? I heard that someone from Donghang stepped on Tianshan mountain to pick up the ruins of the emperor, who came to take a special look. Who is it? The sage figure of the sacred flame faintly opened his mouth, wearing a flame robe with a flame pattern engraved on it. All live in the flame of a strong will. At this time, Ye Fusion walked out of the crowd, looked at the people who came from the eastern desert, and said, I set foot in Tianshan and resonated with the will left by the emperor, so that I could use the power of Tianshan. In addition, I also got Ukiyo's sheet music. You are finally willing to admit it. Nanyu's eyes showed a cold smile. Wasn't he very arrogant towards Tianshan? Tie him to the Tianshan stone wall and violently insult him in front of the world. He wanted to see how Ye Fusion died now. So what? The sage Nanshanfu looked at Ye Fusion indifferently and asked. The meaning of Tianshan mountain has been controlled by me, and you don't need to use it. I can give it to you. Fufu Ye said. Duao and the others sneered, their eyes mocking. Okay, another nodded. Ye Fusion grabbed into his arms, took the score, and divided it into 4, then he waved his hand, the score flew towards the 4 camps, the powerful palms of the 4 camps stretched out, each of them suddenly flew towards them. The wise man who came took over. Opening the score and glancing at it, then closing and folding, the sage Nanshanfu said, You can also come with us. You are all too much. Dean Xiao said coldly. The music score was handed over, but Ye Fusion had to be taken away. Who knows if he has other treasures, and, in Tianshan, this person is so arrogant, Nanyu sneered. There is someone else in Shushan, who handed it over. Duo also said, It seems that the person he wants is Hua Kangking. Sage, how about that? That's him, that's him. There's not a lot of people to take. Ye Fusion sighed silently, then smiled bitterly. At this moment, a figure stepped forward, and Mr. Du who came here. He looked at Ye Fusion and said, How, do you think compromises and concessions can be beneficial? Sorry, teacher. Ye Fusion said, he felt a little guilty. On the way back from Tianshan to Shushan, he heard the master say something about his master. He knew that although the old man was a sage, it seemed that he had another identity. He was in the eastern wasteland, avoiding the world, and because it was mysterious, few people saw him or understood him. He didn't want the teacher to be noticed by the people in Araju because of this incident, so he took the initiative to hand over his score. Unfortunately, it's still a waste. Although the old man said that he would not care about himself and would dedicate himself, he naturally understood that it was a joke. Du glanced at Ye Fusion, and then stepped forward, looking at the people. Since you have a score, why not roll over? They looked at Mr. Du, showing a strange look. Old man, are you looking for death? Nan Yu looked towards Master Du. Now that the Donghang ban is lifted, even if this old man is a sage, what about it? How dare you let them go? Oh, the shadow of Qian appeared from Shushan, but it was Jujui's second disciple, and a voice came out, with a long dragon-like whip and flashing lightning, rolling straight at Nan Yu. Proud. The figure of the peak prince of Nanshan stepped out, walked towards Jujuy, raised his palm and exploded, with a terrible sharp edge. Jujui's dancing long whip trembled in the void, and then fell down like lightning. A crackling sound came out, and the figure of the peak prince screamed, and was whipped by a long whip, fell straight down the mountain, and twitched. The sage of Nanshan stepped forward, a terrible breath permeated, and enveloped Jujuy, but seeing Mr. Du take the same step, his palm towards the void, and instantly, the sage his eyes suddenly fell and he looked at Mr. Du with surprise. You move, kill. Du said coldly, his voice dropped, and the strong people of the four armies stared at them and stared at the old man in shock. He actually threatened the later sages of Nanshan. The sage figure didn't move anymore, but saw Jujuy heading towards Nan Yu like lightning, and saw several figures stepping out at the same time. They were all prominent princely figures, including mighty men who understood the meaning of wisdom. But at this time, Jujuy's whip danced wildly, and a ghost appeared on his body. Then, everyone was shocked to find that Jujuy's body seemed to be divided into two, and then divided into four. Between the heavens and the earth, actually appeared many Lei Ying's avatar, waving their whips at the same time. Just one moment, Tianlei came to the world, and his strength was brilliant. Thousands of thunder. The savage strongman showed sharp eyes and looked at the scene in shock. I saw many ghosts appearing in the void. Endless lightning was born in the sky and swept across the sky. The pops kept coming out. The figures of the pale prince were all pulled into them and flew out. Just a moment later, the thunder whip broke through the barrier and rolled straight into Nan Yu's body, rolling him straight into the void. Let me go, Nan Yu shouted in horror. In Tianshan, he has been treated like this once, this is the second time. However, at this moment, even the people of Nanshan did not seem to hear her screams, but only saw a beautiful figure that was so dazzling and bathed in a noble woman who was endlessly roaring. Thousands of fantasy thunder is the unique action of a certain power in the desert country. Sister Urshi is very strong. Ye Fusion also felt a tremor while watching this scene. Previously, he seemed to have a hidden power. Up and down Shushan, many people stared at Jujuy, all eyes showing different colors. The long whip spun, and Nan Yu's body spun in the void, and Jujuy looked up indifferently. Nan Yu growled, how dare you touch me? As soon as his words fell, he saw a long whip swoop down towards the mountain wall in Shushan. A loud sound came out, the mountain wall exploded under the thunder, and Nan Yu's body hit the mountain wall madly. Shout. The whip was thrown back, and then Jujuy's arm shook. Nan Yu's body flew directly into the distance outside Shushan, and was thrown directly under Shushan. Who are you? The sage Nanshan asked Jujuy. Thousands of fantasy lightning, not here. Guess. Jujuy said with a smile, and then he stepped forward, and then went to the holy fire, looking at Duo said, he offended me, taught him to eat, you have no opinion. Even if you are a member of the Juj family, how can I teach my disciples in the flame? Words of wisdom from flame. Put him in front of me. Jujuy's voice dropped, and the long whip was thrown away again. The sage wanted to take a shot, but felt a strong breath coming towards him. He looked up and looked at Du, his face was extraordinary. Shame, who is he? Slap. The long whip passed, no one stopped, Duo screamed, and the long whip pulled right behind the three-legged Jinbu, and a deep bloodstain appeared on his body. Countless eyes were fixed on it, shockingly watching everything that happened to Shushan. This seems to be beyond everyone's expectations, and the strong man of the isolated state has been cruelly abused. A few years ago, there was a big event in the Juj family in the desolate state. At the age of the Juj family, Miss Juj Mingyu suddenly disappeared, and the Juj family couldn't find her in the desolate state. Jay said, the people of the four major forces all showed a strange dent, and they had all heard of this past. The woman in front of him is the gold of the Juj family in the desolate state, Juj Mingyu. Chapter 395, The Reappearance of Donghang. The people from Wangzhou surprisingly saw the beautiful woman in front of them. Perhaps the name Juj Mingyu was a bit strange to the younger generation, but if you had ever heard of this name, you would know how terrible his life was. Juj Qingfeng, the first person of today's Juj family, became famous all over the world many years ago, and swept the same generation with shocking talent. So far, he was a legendary figure in Abandoned City. Zhuge Kanyang, the peerless figure of today's younger generation of the Zhuge family, had entered the world of sages many years ago. These two people were known as the most prominent figures of the Zhuge family for thousands of years. The first was Zhuge Mingyu's father. The latter is the brother of Zhuge Mingyu. Given this background, it can be said that even the four sages of the four states of Shuangzhou have an inferior status. As for Nanfeng Nanu and Yuao, they are only the descendants of the powerful forces in Azhou, and they are not even the best. Of course, it was even more impossible to compare him with Zhuge Mingyu. Therefore, in the eyes of the lesser ancestors, characters with a higher status than them were hidden. This made Nan Yu and Duo's faces become extremely embarrassed. When they heard the name, they knew that the beating was futile, and they could not take revenge, and no one dared to take revenge on them. When Zhuge Hui heard their words, they turned around and looked at the disciples in the hut, and smiled sweetly. Remember, my real name is Zhuge Mingyu. After seeing him admit that the sage in the desolate state had a slight wave in his heart, the sage in Nanshanfu said, I didn't expect that the extinction of the Zhuge family has come to the eastern desert isolated from the abandoned state. Hunger, replace name again, no wonder the Zhuge family can't find it all over the country. Not only did Zhuge Mingyu change his name, but he also really went down the mountain. Before the Choge city assassination, Ye Fuxian, how many people knew of his whereabouts? Only know that the second disciple of the hut, no one has seen it. I heard that Zhuge Qingfeng originally wanted to send Zhuge Mingyu to the Holy Land for spiritual practice. You don't want to go to the deserted Holy Land. Why did you leave home to come to the eastern wasteland and still worship there? The Tao, the sacred palace, the holy land of the desert, and the land where the evil spirits of the desert congregate. All the desert superpowers wanted to send their descendants to the sacred palace for spiritual practice. Instead, Zhuge Hui left home. Because the Bayun city small town lord is training in the most holy palace. The world's sages began to speak, and everyone was sharp, suddenly thinking of that person who couldn't help but shake his heart. As the sages of the desolate country, they naturally had heard some stories about the desolate country. The owner of Bayun city had trained with Zhuge Qingfeng, the first person in the Zhuge family, many years ago to train in the most holy palace. The relationship was extraordinary, so it was only natural that their descendants could unite. But the woman of the Zhuge family, Qianjin, has a rebellious character and does not like being fated by the family. Are you done? Zhuge Mingyu looked at the people who were talking with a smile. It seems that Miss Zhuge is preparing for Hui citizenship. Now that Zhuge Mingyu revealed his identity, the Zhuge family would naturally come to take over his Hui family. Of course, even if he didn't reveal his identity, he might as well be revealed. This time the eastern wasteland is not small, and the Zhuge family will naturally pay attention. After finishing, you can throw. You have reached the score. You must not set foot in Shushan from now on. If I know someone has moved people in Shushan, you don't have to go out after that, otherwise you will kill. Zhuge Mingyu's eyes scanned the crowd, laughing, you should understand that I dare to kill you, but the people in your family are afraid to kill me. Kacha, Duo clenched his fists, and flames filled his eyes. He was deeply humiliated by the terrifying flames on his pupils. Pop! The long whip flashed, and the whip suddenly hit Duo's body directly. The flesh fluttered, and the Duo pumped straight down again, making an extremely pitiful growl. He hates it. To be so ruthless, unable to even take revenge. Everyone can be intimidated by the situation, how does it feel? Zhuge Mingyu smiled brightly. Before this came to Shushan, how arrogant he was, there was nothing in his eyes. Even if you know that Shushan is virtuous, Dwarf still dares to lead the people of the holy fire to break in. People dare not touch it, also in Tianshan. Only I hit you, you can't fight back. He was bluffing, and so was he. Farewell, the world sage said with curved hands, and then directed people to flee from Shushan. They don't lose anything, and they get a musical score. There's really no need to get tangled up. If it wasn't for Nanu of the Nanshan house and the sole possessor of the holy fire religion, they wouldn't have felt the need to anger Zhuge Mingyu. The strong people of Nanshanfu and holy fire also evacuated Shushan one after another. Soon, the invincible desert countries of Shushan all left. Many eyes were on Zhuge Mingyu, and no one thought that Zhuge Mingyu, the second disciple of the church, had a domineering background, which prevented the arrival of the great powers in the desert country. Of course, they didn't expect that Master Du was so terrible, telling the sage that if you move, you kill. This pair of teacher and student is quite deep. Zhuge Mingyu stepped out, and walked towards Ye Fuxian, not far away, and smiled slightly. What are you doing watching the second sister? Ye Fuxian looked at the beautiful face in front of his eyes, then smiled brightly and said, "So the second sister is so beautiful." Zhu Mingyu smiled slightly when he heard Ye Fuxian's words, stretched out his white fingers and tapped his head, and said, "Be careful with your interpretation. No, I'm afraid I won't be able to see her again if I want to see her again." Ye Fuxian's voice was a little low. He knew that he would leave Donghang to return to Arabia. "Where is that little fart so sad, and gone?" Zhu Mingyu spoke, and then walked over to Mr. Du and said, "Master." Mr. Du nodded gently and looked at the people below. "Before today, my great disciple took over the academy and preached at the academy. The lodge was officially disbanded. From then on, there was only the academy and no cottage." After hearing Du's words, many people sighed for a long time. Will the thatched huts that have been famous for many years become the history of the eastern wasteland? Kotang's disciples were a little sad when they heard what Du said, and slightly lowered their heads. "Let it be," Master Du said, then stepped forward, and everyone in the hut, except for the saints, followed, and went to the mountain. "Teacher, you and your sister are so strong, why do you have to let little brother hand over the score?" Luo Fan asked. He was a little annoyed. Although the teacher and sister surprised the people in Shushan, they were still very unhappy. "My sister and I can always take care of you," Master Du said. "Never underestimate people who take risks for their benefit. Even though Arya scares them, but if they don't score, if Arya and I aren't there, who can guarantee it? Are they secretly attacking Master? Little one. When they get what they want, the sage must understand that we have given up, and of course we must know how to advance and retreat. Master, leave Shanshan to me, let's go," Zhu Gehui said to Du. "It's been years, and I don't have much nostalgia. The teacher is lazy and doesn't want to run around anymore." Mr. Du shook his head. "Who is the teacher's enemy?" Ye Fuxian asked. "Don't think too much about your son, practice well in the future, I will leave some books for you, and show me the truth." Master Du looked at Ye Fuxian. "Okay." Ye Fuxian nodded honestly this time. Ellipsis ellipsis ellipsis. In the next period, the academy was reorganized, strong and very lively, and many people from Donghang came here for pilgrimage. However, Kotang Hoshan has been very quiet lately, with some different emotions. On this day, suddenly there was a dazzling ray of divine light above the Shushan mountains, knocking directly into the clouds and dazzling eyes. In Shushan, many people looked up at the sky, and they saw a row of heavens falling from the sky. These rows of eyes were dazzling to the extreme, better than those from barren countries. Who? Shushan trembled instantly. Countless people flickered, looked up at the sky, and saw that there were gods wearing ***** armor, just like the gods. Among them, it was an extraordinary young woman who was extraordinary. This woman, Feng Guangxia, is bathed in divine light, peerless in the world, like a 9-day goddess. Ye Fuxian, who was practicing, stared at the void and saw this figure. He trembled in his heart, only feeling a little short of breath. How could it be? How could they? The woman he had seen, when he was a teenager, was on Tianyu Mountain in Qingzhou City. This woman's name is Donghang. In Shushan, Du's figure rose to the sky, looking at the person who came from the void. He looked calm and unprepared, as if he knew that the scene was coming. The disciples of the thatched hut stepped out, looked into the void, and swept across the raging sea in their hearts. This group of people is too dazzling, as if the heavenly warriors descended. They all felt that the teacher had been waiting for them to come, perhaps, this was why the teacher did not leave. "Master is gone, what about them?" "Excuse me, is that your highness?" asked Mr. Du, looked at the beautiful young woman. The woman nodded gently, a smile appeared in Master Du's eyes, and then knelt in the void, said, "Sinner meets his majesty. When you are guilty, get up and follow us." The guard behind the woman said. Master Du nodded, stood up, and smiled, "Your highness is 20 years old." "Yes," the woman nodded. Okay. Master Du even smiled, then lowered his head, glanced at the cottage, and said, "I will not be responsible for you in the future. I remember to control myself." "Teacher!" shouted the students. "Gone?" Mr. Du smiled, then blinked towards the void. Above the sky, the woman lowered her head and looked at Shushan in the same way. His eyes returned to Ye Fuxian. After a few years, the two eyes met again. Several years ago, they were 16 years old. This year, they turned 20. Chapter 396, Farewell. Those in the desolate states did not leave the eastern lands. They also know the news. They were horrified and relieved that Ye Fuxian was able to obtain the ruins of the Tianshan mountains. His teacher had a relationship with the emperor. It is not surprising that the disciples accepted the ruins. They also evacuated Donghang, not only worried about Zhu Mingyu, but also worried about Mr. Du. Zhu Mingyu did not go to the most holy palace to train, but he did not expect to worship under the door of a superhero. Ye Fuxian ordered the people to carve the Ukiyo-jo music score on the wall of a mountain in Shushan. When a barren strong man arrived, he led him to take a look, so that one would not remember that the music score would do something unfavorable to the academy. What Duo did to Dong Hazong was a lesson. The thatched huts are covered in a lovely setting. The atmosphere is divided. The teacher was missing before, but everyone knew that he would return. Now that he is gone, no one knows if he will return, whether he can return, or even everyone does not have the ability to find a teacher. Besides, the second teacher's sister will be leaving soon. The thatched hut, this magical place, may be lost. On the mountain, at that time, the students in the hut were eating together, talking and laughing. Zhu Mingyu smiled and said, "Fifth child's food is still very delicious. Sister, if you like it, I will make it for you every day, and I will not go down the mountain in the future." Luo Fan, who was still busy, responded. "When was it so good?" Zhu Mingyu said with a smile. "Sister Ershi, who will look after me after you leave?" Bi Tang Exinger's voice was low and a little sad. After being brought to the hut by the teacher, he always took care of her. It could be said that he was raised by Ershi. "Exinger, will you follow me?" Zhu Mingyu said to Tang Exinger in the north. The North Tang Exinger was a joke. It's no joke to see the sister. He suddenly felt disturbed. Should he go with the sister? He left. Who will take care of the three brothers? Go. Jiu Dongyu, who was eating, said, "Master is busy with academy matters and won't have time to take care of you in the future." Bi Tang Exinger looked at Jiu Dongyu, and she felt another meaning in Jiu Dongyu's words. Three brothers, might as well go. Bi Tang Exinger's eyes were reddish and she lowered her head to eat. She wanted to cry. At that time, his family was destroyed, and the teacher took him up the mountain. The three brothers replied back. Since then, the cottage was his home. The brothers and sisters were even closer to him than their family members. Thatched hut. Exinger, why are you crying? And the big girl is going to marry someone later, isn't it sooner or later to part? Zhu Ye said when he saw the tears in the corner of Bi Tang Exinger's eyes. "I am not married." Bi Tang Exinger shook her head. "Stupid girl," Zhu Mingyu rubbed Bi Tang Exinger's head, then looked at Ye Fuxian and said, "Why is it so quiet today? This man has always been the most active, without saying a word today." "I don't want to talk," Ye Fuxian said. "What? Sad?" Zhu Mingyu laughed. "Brother, in the future I will go to your house to play with you, won't you recognize me?" Ye Fuxian looked up and said to Zhu Mingyu. "What do you think?" Zhu Mingyu raised his hand and tapped Ye Fuxian's head, and said, "If you don't dare to come to see my brother in the future, I will find you. Fu Tian and I should go see sister together later," Hua Jiu said softly. Zhu Mingyu's eyes turned and fell on Hua Jiu's body, his eyes showed a strange look, and he looked at him with a smile. "Brother." Hua Jiu was a little confused. "I know what to do to get little master to come see me." Zhu Mingyu laughed. "Well, I will take you with me so that I can have friends with Exinger." "Ah." Hua Jiu rolled her eyes, then shook her head, "I won't go." However, at this time, Ye Fuxian saw his eyes fall on Wajiyu. Looking into his eyes, Waji said softly, "What are you looking at, and want to let me go?" "See you, big brother's words can be considered," Ye Fuxian said seriously. "Don't think about it," Hua Jiu shook her head. "You're thinking about reconciliation." Zhu Mingyu smiled, "The reconciliation is so beautiful, I can't be sure that he will follow you into the desert. He is very clear that after the dissolution of the hut, Ye Fuxian is bound to go to the desolate state. The teacher doesn't exist, the master doesn't, and he doesn't. At that time, everything could only be done by Ye Fuxian himself." All right. Ye Fuxian nodded, he was also out of the same consideration as Sister Ershi. After returning to the family, "Wait for me." At this time, Jiu Dongyu, who was also a little speechless today, began to speak, and everyone looked at Brother 3, and naturally knew who he was saying this sentence to. "What are you waiting for?" Zhu Mingyu did not look at him, and lowered his head to enjoy the food. "You know," said Jiu Dongyu. "I don't know." Zhu Mingyu looked at him. Jiu Dongyu's eyes met his, and the other's eyes looked at the second and third brothers, and the atmosphere became strange for a while. "When I married you," Jiu Dongyu stood up after speaking, then turned and left. The voice fell, and everyone's eyes were collectively dull and completely frozen there. "Three brothers dominate. Three brothers are very handsome," Ye Fuxian said, watching Jiu Dong leave. "A real man," said Lo Fen. handsome. Yi Shaoxi was stunned. Zhu Mingyu looked back, a smile tugged at the corners of his lips, and then looked at Ye Fuxian, and said, eat. After dinner, Ye Fuxian and Hua Jiu walked towards Hoshan alone. The two held hands, and Hua Jiu whispered softly, I'm not leaving. Princess, you look very beautiful, very attractive, Wang Zhou, at that time, what else do you want to do if you want to take someone? Ye Fuxian said jokingly, Donghazong has happened before. Bao wants to grab Hua Kangking head on. You protected me, Hua Jiu said softly. Ye Fuxian heard Hua Jiu's soft voice, lowered his head slightly, and felt a little guilty. He walked to the cliff and saw a sea of clouds in front of him. He said, Qingzhou City, Donghai City, and Nandu country. I thought I saw the whole world. But this world is bigger than I thought. The prediction of the so-called emperor's life is more like a distant legend. I promised your emperor's life, but so far, I don't have the ability to protect you. When Hua Xiu heard Ye Fuxian's words, he seemed to feel depression from his mood, his eyes lifted, and he said to Ye Fuxian, you look at me. Ye Fuxian turned his gaze to Hua Xiu. Hua Jiu stepped forward, leaned gently against him, raised her toes, kissed Ye Fuxian's lips gently, and then parted. She didn't say anything, but didn't want to stimulate her beloved man. A smile, like 100 flowers in full bloom, Hua Jiu looked up at the sky, the sun was shining. At the age of 15, others thought that you didn't know how to train. At that time, you were optimistic and bright. That year's autumn sacrifice was a blockbuster and proved yourself at Qingzhou Academy. At the age of 16, you set foot in the city of Donghai, Luowang House too. The order of generals in front of Ziwei Palace, disciple of the famous Qin Demon, that year, the emperor wants you, you don't want to, you have to turn your life against the sky, on the Fenhua feast, Ye Tianzi cherishes, listens to the wind party, who fights with, familiar with the ancient world, to the hut, people have not come, Donghang already has your legend, this year, you guys are 20, my Tianshan world war swept everything. And now the whole Donghang, who doesn't know you? Hua Jiu smiled brightly, and the sun fell on her face, she said softly, Ye Fuxian, I am proud of you. Ye Fuxian turned his eyes, looked at Hua Jiu's beautiful face, and smiled, my fairy has learned to comfort people. Hua Jiu also looked at him and said with a smile, I am telling the truth. You are only 20 years old. Facing the prince and the sage, it is not good. I believe that because you can let Qingzhou City and Donghai Cheng's contemporaries, Nandu Guo, and Donghanging are all overshadowed. One day, the world will be shadowed. One day, all of China will know your name. Am I very good? Ye Fuxian boasted a little. Okay. Hua Jiu nodded solemnly, you promised my queen, I remember, you have to do it. Okay. Ye Fuxian's decadence seems to be empty because of Waji's discourse. He didn't have time to rot. He used to be so confident when he was little. Now he was frustrated again and again to smooth the edges. What's that? Then you promise to go with the second teacher? Ye Fuxian asked. I promise. Hua Jiu nodded, this is not to run away. When I am in Wangzhou, I will train harder and wait for you to come to me. Okay. Ye Fuxian nodded solemnly, then hugged Hua Jiu directly, and said, before you part, do you want to solve a big problem in life? Thinking pretty. Hua Jiu was hugged by her waist, her face slightly reddened. You are lonely and cold. Then come to me quickly. Fairy, you are too cruel. Huh. The voices of the two came out one after another, the sun was sprinkled on the green grass, which made Ye Fuxian feel that although the world of practice was cruel, it was very beautiful. He had so many people who liked him, and people he liked. A few days later, above the mountains, a huge figure descended from the sky, with an extraordinary temperament, and was extremely extraordinary. These people were from the Zhuge family. They naturally came to pick up people. Zhu Mingyu took everything in stride. Shushan and Kotang disciples came to meet each other. Seeing the figure in front of them, Zhu Mingyu smiled and said, don't miss your brother too much. Beside him, Biatang Exinger was crying, and said softly, Master, 4 brothers, 5 brothers, little lion, Fuxian, take good care of yourself. Then he looked up and looked at Jiu Dongyu who was standing in the distance, 3 brothers, be careful. When you arrive in Wangzhou, listen to your sister. Dao Sheng said softly. Biatang Exinger nodded. See you should also listen to her brother. Ye Fuxian stood in front of Hua Jiu, gently stroked her hair, and said softly. Yes. Hua Jiu nodded, and then looked at the flowers behind Ye Fuxian to love them. Father, mother, teacher, suzerain, you are careful. Little master. Zhu Mingyu opened his arms to Ye Fuxian. Ye Fuxian stepped forward, hugged Zhu Mingyu gently, and then hugged Biatang Exinger next to him. Little brother, look forward to seeing you next time, Zhu Gehui said softly, and then the figure left and headed for the empty ship in the sky. Let's go. There, a young man with a big temper opened his mouth. He looked down and looked at Ye Fuxian and others with an indifferent look. The void ship departed. Zhu Hui finally glanced and fell on the lonely white figure behind, then turned and walked away. Chapter 397, Cuckoo Ren San. A few days later, the hut became very lively, and Wang Wezong's disciples moved into the hut. This is what Mr. Do before leaving. Then, the hut became the pulse of Wang Wezong's disciples. For a moment, Yinjing Yanyan and the beautiful ladies were in the mountains. If you put it on Ye Fuxian in the past, it must have been very happy, but now you have lost the mood of the past. In the past few days, he had been reading and practicing on the cliff. The person who accompanied him was a parable and now was the rest of his life. At this time, there were several figures walking towards the side. They were Sword Saint, Mochizuki Fairy, Zuye and Luo Fan, and Dean Xiao also came here. Little Master, Dao Sheng shouted. Brother, Dean Xiao, Fairy, Ye Fuxian called back. In the future, your brother will be the Dean. Call me Master, Dean Xiao laughed. Okay, Master Xiao. Ye Fuxian nodded. Sit down, we also walk freely. Dean Xiao said, I've been busy repairing the campus lately, and I don't have time to talk to you. Uncle Shi is polite. Ye Fuxian was still a bit strange to Dean Xiao. After all, he had not seen it much, but it was not the same as he had imagined. Previously, they naturally thought that the relationship between the dean and the teacher was not very good. However, the fact is quite the opposite. I am afraid that the feelings between brothers and sisters cannot be understood by outsiders. Some people said that Dean Xiao wanted to take full control of the campus, and was dissatisfied with Mr. Du, but the dean always wanted to let his older brother take his place. The group sat on the floor like this. Dao Sheng said, My brother, the Qin dynasty has gone to the sky, and the palace has become an empty city. I have to worry about the academy's revenge, and it will become history. Wu Chen and Liu Shenyu they practice in Shushan. I asked for their opinion. They didn't receive reparations, so I let Liu Go's people return, but I won't order anyone else to do it. This is Liu. The country's family affairs will be left to them to resolve on their own. Okay. Ye Fuxian nodded. The traitors Liu Guo, Ye Wuchen and Liu Shenyu could not forgive. The other thing is, your three older brothers left, met me, left alone, and didn't say goodbye to the others. Sword Holy Road, Ye Fuxian nodded gently. This is the expected ending. For the third brother, how can such a character not leave? The proud white scholar, pursuing his goal. Master and your three elder brothers have high hopes for you. They left before they came to you, and said that you don't belong to the eastern wasteland. Your world is getting further and further away. Alright, after a few days, I will go to Wangzhou. Ye Fuxian said, 4 brothers, 5 brothers, and 7 brothers, what plans do you have? We will stay at the academy for now. When the academy is completely stable and Donghang is completely new, we will leave. Zhu Ye said, the dream that the teacher has not fulfilled, we are disciples, we must always help. Okay. Ye Fuxian nodded. His life was scattered, and everyone had their own way. It's a matter of time before the thatched hut disbands, but it's too early to be sad. Your teacher always wanted to change something, but in the end he found that nothing could be changed, and the disciples were involved. Dean Xiao said, that's a real jerk. Uncle Shi, who is the teacher and why was he taken away? Ye Fuxian asked. Dean Xiao's eyes showed a hint of reminiscence, and then he said, your teacher was full of arrogance when you were young like you, thinking of traveling the world until he met two people who changed his fate. Eastern Phoenix Emperor and Ye King Emperor. Ye Fuxian turned his eyes and looked at Dean Xiao. Yes. Dean Xiao nodded solemnly. Few people know about this piece of history, but your teacher left with the emperor, and it was many years after he left, and when he came back, it seemed to smooth out the edges and corners. Lazily fell. I asked him what was happening outside. He said that he couldn't get used to this world. He killed some people, because who killed didn't tell me, but there must be a background that he can't play, if no. It is necessary to return to the hidden name of Donghang, and it is not until he accepts his disciples that he gradually becomes less degenerate. He had some goals, but in the end, it was empty, but he said before leaving that he has no regrets in his life and has never seen another. The scenery has killed people who dare not kill others, and now there is a group of outstanding disciples. Normal, even if they died, there would be no regrets. Ye Fuxian listened quietly, thinking that the teacher lazy drunk might have a strong story. Your teacher used to say that the truth in the world is the greatest, but the truth is often not as big as a fist, so you have to have a fist that is harder than others before others will listen to you. But in reality, that bastard never said it to my face. It makes sense, because his fists are harder. Dean Seo complained sadly, and Ye Fusion and the others couldn't help but laugh. It seemed that Dean Seo was suffering a lot. Therefore, his life is full of contradictions, and he has always lived in a world of self-contradiction. Dean Seo continued, today, he has given up everything, and he said he is waiting for the person he wants to wait for, all in the future. I leave it to you. He's waiting for someone he wants to wait for. Ye Fusion showed a strange look, and said, who? When he asked this sentence, he found that Dean Seo and his older brother were looking at him. He was the last disciple of Master Du. After he went up the mountain, Master Du accompanied him to train in Hoshan. Even if he left, Master Du said he had no regrets. So who is Mr. Du and others? Am I? Ye Fusion muttered, but the old bastard who always hated his talent, but who is he? Funny, but he couldn't laugh at the moment. Looking up at the sky, Ye Fusion seemed to see the figure of the old man again. Why is the old alcoholic so respectful and hateful? Who is he? Does the old man know anything? The only thing they have in common is that they have a relationship with two emperors. Chatting casually again, the master left. Ye Fusion said behind them, Master, my brother, I will not say goodbye to you when I leave. The academy, thatched hut, will always be your home. Dao Sheng turned around and smiled at Ye Fusion. The group looked at him with a smile, then turned and left. After a few more days, it was still here, but Ye Fusion was no longer there. All the straw disciples had left the mountain, including their Luo Fan in Snowy Night, and now there was only the female disciple Mizuki. At this time, a beautiful woman is standing near the cliff, quietly observing the sea of clouds, and the scenery here is beautiful. This woman is Chu Yan. Older brother. A voice came at this time. Chu Yan came. She is also beautiful. Looking at Yunhai said, what are you thinking? There isn't anything. Chu Yan shook his head. Don't lie to me. Since Tianshan came down, you have thought about it. Chu Yan said, can you tell me? You want to know? Chu Yan asked. Chu Li nodded. Chu Yan smiled and said, I like someone I don't like. Whether you should or not, as long as it's worth pursuing. With your charm, who can't be attracted to this Donghang? Chu Yan said. Of course. Who? People who have been training here. Chu Yan smiled brightly. Everything is over, everyone, start again. On another hill of Shushan, there is also a very beautiful woman. She looks into the distance and cries. Why go alone? He cries. Next to him, a young man stood there and said quietly, because you can't stand it, you drift away with him. This is his own idea, doesn't he know it is cruel? Liu Shenyu exclaimed. It was just as cruel to him, but he would rather endure it all, and it would be the same if he changed me. Liu Feyang laughed, he wants to make the sky for you instead of letting you suffer with him. In Shushan, there was another woman looking into the distance. It was Yi Qingshuan, but instead of crying, she smiled and looked into the distance. He knew that from the moment he chose, he would go through it all. Not entirely his, more belonging to the young man beside him. Ellipsis, ellipsis, ellipsis. Several months later, there were rumors in Tianshan. It is said that the sound of the piano is heard in Tianshan Mountain, which is beautiful and integrated into the snowflake. I don't know if it's the empire's intention to reproduce. Not too many people care. At the peak of the Tianshan Mountains, vast white snow continues to fall. In the snowflakes, there is a quiet violin playing in white clothes, that is Ye Fusion. He did not leave Donghang, but practiced here. In addition to practicing the piano to improve his mental strength, he also practiced magic and physical martial arts temper. Not far from Ye Fusion, the rest of his life sat cross-legged and practiced there. In the distance, the one-handed sword was fixed in the snow. Ye Wuchen bathed in the sword, and rode in the snow. There is also a woman on the snowy mountain, secretly feeling the coldness of the snow and ice on the peak of Tianshan Mountain, that is Lulanzu. At this time, the melodious piano sound stopped slowly. Ye Fusion turned his eyes, looked towards the mountain road, and saw there, a beautiful figure came in the snow and reached the top of the mountain. He walked gently and walked towards Ye Fusion step by step. Ye Fusion looked at her in a dress, wearing a simple rough cloth shirt, like the clothes of a monk, but even so, she was still beautiful and pure. Ye Fusion looked at the woman's dress in front of him, with a slight wave in his heart. Last time in Shushan, a senior monk from Qiankyu Temple came. I want to clear my doubts. Then I went to Qiankyu Temple and now practice in the temple, Hua Kangking said with a smile. as if she had recovered the purity of her past. Well, it's fine. Ye Fusion smiled when he saw Hua Kangking's smile. Can I listen to another complete Ukyocho? Hua Kangking whispered softly. Okay. Ye Fusion nodded, then looked seriously, touching the piano with both hands. The melodious music sounded again in the Tianshan Mountains. Maybe this is the last one. At the end of the song, people scatter. Chapter 398, Aeon, Cloud Moon City. The state of silence is vast and endless. In the north, there is a demon city near the edge of the demon world. The demon ***** family in Taishuan Mountain stood there. To the west was the city of Bayun, which guarded one side, an endless realm. Cover a large area. To the south was a vast and endless snowy area. There is a temple and two strong horizontal forces. A strange area formed between the snowy area and the volcano of fire, and in the center was a very famous alchemy city. Of course, the most prosperous place is still the territory of Zhongzhou City. This area exudes the central place of a desolate country, and the strong is like a cloud. A land in the eastern part of Wangzhou, Yunyu City. This city is not the main city of the eastern region, but it still has an ancient history and a majestic atmosphere. At this moment in the sky above Yunyu City, there was a black winged eagle flying in the void. This black winged eagle has extremely sharp eyes. Although he is an eagle, when he spreads his wings, it gives people the feeling of a penguin, and the speed is strange. Fast there were 4 young men behind black wind carving. The young man sitting at the forefront was handsome and looking ahead. There was a burly young man beside him who closed his eyes and lifted his soul. Behind the one-armed handsome figure with 2 ancient swords on his back, crossed there is also a masked woman's blue shirt, with long silver hair, like a waterfall, and transparent open eyes. With silver light, beauty and devil, with a touch of coldness. This pedestrian is Ye Fusion, who came from the east to the east desert from the desolate country. He walked and stopped along the way. This Yunyu city should be considered a relatively large city, and its level of prosperity is higher than in the east. Qingqing City and Chengdu City in the middle of the desert are both strong and not weak. There should be a crescent lake. Lu Langxiu stood up, the wind blew in her body, and she pointed her finger forward at the crescent-shaped lake below, holding the map in her hand, which came after entering the city. In front of Crescent Lake, there should be a Bayou Tower. Looking down at the Crescent Lake, a palace-shaped building can be seen faintly, a black wind engraving is rushing, and the view is gradually becoming clearer. This is a restaurant inn in the shape of a white jade palace, one of the 3 inns in Yunyu City. All of them are white, carved like white jade, and laid on top, like a royal palace. As it approached, the black wind sculpture swooped down and came under the steps of the Baiulu Inn. Ye Fusion only felt a spirit aura. It is said that the Baiulu in front of his eyes is made of spirit stone, and a magic circle is hidden inside. Living in it can feel a very extraordinary aura, which is good for spiritual practice. Looking up, Ye Fusion walked up the white jade stairs and stopped outside the lobby. Lu Langxiu and the rest of her life walked on spirit stones. They planned to stay here for a few days. Locally, of course, it was convenient to inquire about the news, and he needed a map of the state of the desert, which was hard to come by in such a small place. There were many people on the white jade steps. His Majesty came from outside. Next to him, a slightly thin youth wearing a blue dress asked Ye Fusion. Come. Ye Fusion nodded with a smile. Chia Yangting. The other is curved. You are Fusion. But brother, he came here to fight for the 4 major factions. Yangting asked. Not. Ye Fusion shook his head. He just arrived, and the big 4 don't know anything. The people who came to Yunyu City now came for this reason, but they misunderstood. Yangting arched slightly. By the way, when I first arrived, I was still a little new to Yunyu City, and I was hoping to give some advice. Ye Fusion said politely. Dare to teach each other, Yangting laughed. Brother, all right. At this time, a voice came, and a shadow came out of the lobby, with a ponytail, looking very young, neat, and very pure. This is Sister Yang Yi. Yangting introduced, this is Brother Ye. Ye Fusion and Yang Yi nodded at each other. Yang Yi's beautiful eyes looked at Ye Fusion, thinking that life is really beautiful. With the growth of Ye Fusion's temperament, the beauty of his face has become more and more extraordinary, and it is not an exaggeration to say that Yushu is in the wind. What am I doing this way? Ye Fusion smiled gently. Yang Yi noticed her discomfort, blushed slightly, and looked away. Even though Brother Ye looks really good, don't you need to do that? Yangting said with a smile. Yang Yi lifted him up and kicked him, and said softly, you are talking nonsense, I just want to know. At this time, the ground below shook slightly. Ye Fusion turned his eyes and saw above the white jade stairs, a figure fell there. This man is tall and burly, his upper body is half a shoulder, only a few silver white. The armor covers some important parts of the body, his eyes are like bronze bells, and his eyes are drifting, quite majestic. Stepping on the stairs, he passed between Ye Fuxian and them. What kind of monster is that? At this time, Yang Yi looked up at the sky ahead, and saw the figure of a fiery red knight riding the monster. This monster is a flying bird and is blue in color. Behind the monster is a female knight. She wore a fiery red dress, which outlined a wavy figure, and had a unique charm. This woman was a little overbearing with the beauty of heroic beauty. King Ye, Yang Ting said. The female knight landed on the green lotus, and also passed Ye Fuxian, without squinting, but her Qingyu mountain glanced at the black wind carving and let out a long buzzing sound. Haifeng Daibie was silent there. When he saw Kangming Changming, his eyes suddenly became sharp, his gaze was directed at King Ying, and he could see a dark black air flowing in his eyes. The green symbols continued to make the female knight frown, staring at him, wondering what the bullies were doing. He glanced at Black Wind carving. King Ye followed the equestrian woman into the lobby, but saw Black Wind carve glancing proudly on the other side, then closed his eyes and lifted his soul. At this time the rest of his life in Lu Langxiu came out. Ye Fuxian said, Brother Yang, I'm fine. Yang Ting's brothers and sisters glanced at the rest of his life in Lu Langxiu. The temperament of this hiker is quite extraordinary. Although Lu Langxiu was veiled, she only saw her temper, and her appearance was not bad. Go, let's ride together. Yang Ting laughed, Ye Fuxian nodded, and the two walked to the side, walked sideways up the stairs, and found each other's floor and courtyard, which happened to be next door. Step into the courtyard and find that the entrance is a backyard. Go through the corridor to the front yard. You can see the view of Crescent Lake in the distance. You can also see people descending on the Bayou Tower. Donghang, right in that direction. Ye Fuxian stared into the distance and muttered. At this time, he had set foot in Wangzhou city. It is very far from Donghang, and it takes several months to cross. From then on, they were considered truly out and about, far from their homeland. Lu Langxiu also stood beside him, and said softly, Before I checked in the lobby, the map of Wangzhou is not easy to get. Wangzhou is too big. Even in this city, most people can't walk at all. From the east, not to mention the entire state desert. Ye Fuxian nodded gently, and said, It's been difficult. I don't know what the fate of this trip will be, I hope you won't regret it. He persuaded Lu Langxiu, but the other party insisted on coming to Wangzhou. This is a maid's duty, Lu Langxiu said softly, as for regret, it is my own decision. Is Brother Ye inside? A voice came from the next page. Here, Brother Yang came here directly, Ye Fuxian said. Okay. A laugh came, and then two figures appeared from the side. The scenery here is really nice. Yang Ting laughed, but it's expensive. Brother Yang, I have a question to ask. I went to train and want to disband the desolate country. I don't know where I can get a simple map of the desolate country. Ye Fuxian asked. Want the whole desert state? Yang Ting's eyes flashed, and he was a little surprised. It would be unrealistic for Ye Fuxian to leave the desert state of Ye Fuxian's time. Too weird, Ye Fuxian nodded. This kind of map is almost useless, very few, and I don't know where to get it, but the four major forces of Yunyu city must be there. Yang Ting said. Which four powers? How strong? Ye Fuxian asked. Fengjia Yunyu city, Wangjia, Leizong, and Yunyu Business League. Yang Ting said, these four forces are the top forces in Yunyu city, and they all have top prince figures. Ye Fuxian nodded slightly, this is just Yunyu city, how strong should be in the desert main city? Brother Yang is Yunyu Cheng's man. Ye Fuxian asked. Why do you want to stay in Bayou Tower? Ye Fuxian was curious. Brother Ye, how about we have a drink? Talk while walking, Yang Ting said. Okay. Ye Fuxian nodded, and then the group left the courtyard and headed for the wine house above the Bayou Tower. There are a lot of resources in Yunyu city, and most of them are controlled by the four major forces. The four major forces fight every year at the end of the year to determine the allocation of resources. In order to maintain balance, the four major forces will not send princes. Fight, so fighting is a person in the heaven realm, coupled with the battle due to casualties, and the four forces themselves need to absorb extraordinary talent, so that the rules are formed over time. At the end of each year, the four major factions fight, they choose extraordinary talents to fight for, and those who have outstanding performance can directly enter the four major forces. Baiulu is the industry of the Yunyu Business League. At this time, the Yunyu Business League will come here to invite other people, so I will ask Brother Ye to come for this. Yang Ting introduced Ye Fusion, and a group of people came to the open-air wine restaurant on the roof of the building. There were many people here, who looked very excited. So Brother Yang wants to join the UNU Business League. Ye Fusion said. The UNU Chamber of Commerce is the power of the Chamber of Commerce, with the greatest cultivation resources in its hands and a generous shot. Yang Ting's eyes flickered and he said. Ye Fusion nodded gently, and when he came to Desert A, he also found that the people of Desert A were better at using spiritual resources. For example, Lingxi is very common here, and it is the currency to trade. Is Brother Ye interested? The group found a seat and asked Yang Ting. Not. Ye Fusion shook his head with a smile. He came to Wangzhou on this trip and learned from practitioners. He is not ready to join any army. Chapter 399, Ordinary People. Yang Ting was not surprised, because Ye Fusion wanted to travel to a deserted state. It was naturally impossible to stay in one place. Brother Ye, the UNU Business League controls many auction houses and trading houses in the city. They must have a map of the desert city you want. Even if you don't want to join, there is another way, which is to fight with jobs. Get what you want, said Yang Ting. Did this work? Ye Fusion showed an interesting look. Of course, the battle between the 4 factions, you help them win the battle, and there is a reward. Those who are outstanding in battle can constantly beat their opponents, and they can get great rewards, otherwise how will they attract others to fight for them knowing that in this battle, casualties are very common. It is for this reason that they will not send all their troops. Otherwise, they will be red-eyed and will easily control the outbreak of war. It has happened in history. Yang Ting explained. I see, I'll think about it. Ye Fusion nodded, looking at the crescent lake in the distance. The breeze, the environment of this Baiulu open-air restaurant is really good. At this time, a loud sound came from behind them, and Ye Fusion turned his head and saw the battle platform in the center of the restaurant. 2 figures stepped there to prepare for battle. The open-air wine restaurant is huge, so the battle platform in the middle doesn't stand out at all. The 2 rose into the air, and a war broke out directly above the wine restaurant, both in the heaven realm. Does Baiulu not care? Ye Fusion asked. Standing on the battlefield is the standard meaning of reciprocal combat. Baiulu deliberately provides a place to fight. I'm glad to see this activity, especially at this time. It is very helpful for them to assess the strength of these people. Now they are living in Baiulu. Almost all of them came for the battle of the 4 major factions, and naturally they are willing to show something to make Baiulu people take notice. Yang Ting said, Baiulu will be confident in Mingyun Moon Business League. Sure enough, this battle couldn't stop once it broke out, and one after another came to the battlefield to discuss the battle, and more people in the wine restaurant opened up. Ye Fusion saw an old man wearing a black magician's robe. He is in a strong state and has very strong strength. The spell control is pure. At this age, the guesswork practice talent is relatively poor, but due to the long practice time, more research is done on the spell and the control is stronger. The black-robed mage successively defeated the opponent, and gradually there were also strong characters to challenge. At this time, the green horseman that Ye Fusion had met stepped onto the stage, and his palm gathered a fiery red spear with fire. Aura wrapped around her body, making her look even more heroic and aggressive, and she also displayed a sexy temperament in a strong outfit. I know who they are, Fire Lady Liu Lan, Black Mage Shi Mu, who are more famous in this area, Yang Ting said. The battle between the 2 was fierce. Liu Lan, a fire girl who is good at the dual attributes of fire and fire, is a female knight who practices martial arts. He has a strong attack ability. He incorporated attribute talent into marksmanship, and every attack was gorgeous. Support your own attacks with spells. However, his attacks often missed, and a black mist appeared on Shi Mu's body, and then the whole person disappeared from thin air and appeared in another position. This made Ye Fusion show a different color, and freely observe the operation of the idea. Immediately Shi Mu's actions became clear. It seemed like he couldn't take his eyes off her. Black fog is just a dazzling method. Examu actually used water-based spells. It must also cast mental power spells into it, causing visual illusions. At the same time, the spell is diverted, but at the same level as others. People seem unpredictable. Who does Ye think will win? Yang Ting asked. Fire Girl, Ye Fusion said. Now the Black Mage Examu has the advantage. Yang Ting was slightly surprised. With her abilities, the Black Mage Examu put the Fire Maiden in a state of distress. It's still offensive and defensive power that determines the victory or defeat of a battle. Although some methods have miraculous effects, Examu is a martial arts practitioner who is not good at melee. He can't attack, his attack power is on par with the Fire Maiden, but his defense is not as good. Fire girl. It should fail, but it could take some time, Ye Fusion said. Yang Ting looked at the battlefield curiously. She knew still had the upper hand, but as time went on, changes gradually appeared, and the fierce woman became more and more fierce, making Shi Mu a little busy and confused, and after a while, she was defeated. Brother Ye is amazing, Yang Yizhen said. Yang Ting also looked at Ye Fusion with admiration. This observation is really extraordinary. Older brother. Ye Fusion smiled at Yang Yi in a ponytail. Her pure face was probably less than 20. Looks like he's old. He couldn't think of his younger sister Ye Shaokan, and the girl had grown up. I don't know how it is there anyone still in the East China Sea? Yeah, can I call it like this? Yang Yi smiled. Of course. Ye Fusion nodded. Brother Ye. Yang Yi smiled and looked at Ye Fusion. Did anyone compliment you for being handsome? Ye Fusion blinked, then nodded solemnly. The rest of his life ridiculed his head and deceived the little girl and could not stand it. Ye Wuchen had always been quiet and had no sense of presence, but Yang Ting looked at him occasionally, and Ye Wuchen sat there, giving off a unique feeling. Incredible, those two names have been heard for a long time. At this time, there was praise there. Ye Fusion looked at them, and they saw two young men going there, a man and a woman, a handsome man, and a woman. Wearing a light blue dress, sexy instead of noble, charming. Behind them were several guards standing there, apparently both of them had extraordinary family histories. Once they appear, they attract most of the eyes of the restaurant. Shi Mu and Huo Nu Liu Lan nodded politely. It's Shank Hair and Shank King, children, you new business league brother and sister, Bai Yulu is in charge of their father. Yang Ting whispered to Ye Fusion, I'm going there. Speaking of Yang Ting, he got up and walked towards the Shank Hair brothers and sisters, slightly embarrassed, and then continued to surround the two of them, appearing to be a little whispering. Why? Yang Yi asked for the rest of his life, and he was a little confused. If he wanted to join the Unu Business League to rely on his strength, then he would lose his temper. Yang Yi lowered his head slightly. My entire life. Ye Fusion glanced at the rest of his life. After all, they and Yang Ting were meeting for the first time. They meet each other and are not familiar with each other's style of behavior. They are not qualified to interfere. Yang Yi, let's go downstairs first. Ye Fusion said to Yang Yi. Okay. Yang Yi nodded slightly, and Ye Fusion and others walked towards the stairs and left the restaurant. Back in the courtyard, Ye Fusion sat in front of Crescent Lake, thinking about the battle in the wine shop. The Black Mage Examu and the Fire Maiden should be considered relatively strong characters. Ye Fusion judged that their fighting strength was roughly similar to some of the Tianzhou characters in the academy. Therefore, Ye Fusion speculated that the spiritual practitioners of Yunyu City were no better than the evil characters in the Eastern Wasteland. Strong, but this is also normal. After all, Yunyu City was not the main city. There were many cities of this level in the deserted eastern region. Top-level monsters are bound to go to the main city to train. Moreover, despite the lack of resources in the Eastern Wasteland, the talents of the top criminals are not bad, at least they can be compared to the top criminals in Yunyu City. The aura between heaven and earth here is truly extremely powerful. Ye Fusion laughed, then closed his eyes and practiced. After a while, a voice came next, Brother Ye, can I pass? Come. Ye Fusion nodded, Yang Yi, come here. His voice dropped, and a figure next to him appeared around the wall from the air, and he said, Brother Ye called me a child. Co Yi, Ye Fusion shouted. Yang Yi smiled and said, did Brother Ye look down on my brother just now? Not. Ye Fusion shook his head. He told the truth. Everyone has their own way of life. He didn't know each other and wasn't qualified to point at anyone else. My parents left the city to enter ruin when they were young, and they were killed. Since then, I became dependent on my brother. Later, I clashed with other people. My brother and I were injured and my body suffered. After many injuries, cultivation has been hampered since then. My brother and his harsh cultivation want to participate in the battle of the four major factions, actually want to make me spirit grass to treat my wounds. Yeyu Business League controls a lot of transactions. They must have some kind of grass spirit, and he whispered to the people who approached the business league for this. Yang Yi whispered, also, this time staying in Bayulu also needs to drain our savings. All this is for me. In fact, my brother's talent for cultivation is not bad, but I was dragged down. Brother Ye, tell you this has no other meaning, but I don't want you to misunderstand. He smiled after speaking, turned and left. When Ye Fusion saw Yang Yi leave, he smiled bitterly, then looked back at Yu Sheng and said, listen. For the rest of his life, he scratched his head, a little cruelly, and said, I'm sorry. Ye Fusion looked into the distance and whispered, the desolate country isn't all the children of the top families like Nanshanfu and Shenghuo as we imagine. Most of them are ordinary people with ordinary lives, just like us. To work for a goal. Brother Ye. At this time another voice came next, and then Yang Ting came directly to the side and smiled. Brother Ye, I just asked, New Business League has a desert state map, as long as if you can be selected to participate in the battle of the four factions and perform well, you will have a chance. Ye Fusion and the rest of his life stared at Yang Ting stupidly. Looks like he just came back. Yang He had secretly chatted with them earlier. Okay, I think about it seriously. Ye Fusion nodded with a smile, without mentioning what happened to Yang Yi. Well, you want to talk to me, I will report for you. Yang Ting laughed, then turned and left. Thank you, said the rest of his life suddenly. Yang Ting's steps were left behind, and he looked at the rest of his life in a shocking way. Meet each other, take care of each other. Yang Ting smiled, and then returned to his page. Chapter 400, Catch People. Ye Fusion has been training in the Bayou Tower, and the bonus training with the magic circle is really more convenient. In the past few days, the number of people in Baiulu has also increased. Strong people have arrived one after another, all for the upcoming battle of the four major factions. In the past few days, Ye Fusion and Yang Ting and Yang He became more familiar with each other. They are less involved with each other. Brothers and sisters often come to Ye Fusion's courtyard. In addition to talking about some interesting things in Wangzhou, they will also discuss. When he practiced, Yang Ting found that Ye Fusion had some unique opinions about the practice, which greatly benefited him and was very curious about Ye Fusion's strength. In addition, Yang Ting was active in Baiulu and met a lot of people. He was better at dealing with people, probably because his parents died prematurely. The two brothers and sisters must have survived alone. At this time in the courtyard, Yang He and Ye Fusion were chatting. Brother Ye, where are you from? Yang He asked curiously. Ye Fusion looked extraordinary and had a special temperament for the rest of his life. Ye Wuchen and Lu Langxiu were also unusual. Previously, he had thought Lu Langxiu was Ye Fusion's girlfriend, so her brother-in-law's misunderstanding Lu Langxiu said that she was a maid, which surprised her. I came from a long distance, far to the east, there is an isolated piece of land from a deserted country, and my hometown is there. Ye Fusion said. I haven't been out of Yu City for a long time. Brother Ye has already traveled this far. Yang He smiled and said, does Brother Ye want to miss you? My parents. Ye Fusion smiled bitterly, I don't know. Don't laugh when you say it, I don't know who my real parents are. Ah. Yang He was shocked and said, sorry, Brother Ye. By the way, maybe they're amazing big guys and are enjoying themselves at the moment. Ye Fusion was joking. Then will you hate them? Yang Ye asked. Hate. Ye Fusion shook his head, I never thought about it, but it shouldn't be. Life is very exciting, there's blood flow, loss and sadness, walking in every country, going through every story, it's not supposed to live like this. Yes. Yang He nodded vigorously, looked at the handsome face of the sunshine, thinking that Brother Ye was really very optimistic and open-minded. Yang Yi, come to harass your big brother again. I don't know. I was chatting with Brother Ye. I can't believe you asked Brother Ye. Yang Yidav. Ye Fusion smiled. This girl. Yang Ting smiled and shook his head, looking at Ye Fusion, brother, this Bayou Tower is already full, it's just a resident, it seems that the battle between the four major factions will definitely be very fierce again, Brother Ye is thinking about it. We are ready to participate. Ye Fusion nodded. He considered these 2 days to participate in the four major forces. They don't need to show too many whole cards, they have to be enough to beat a few opponents, and get a map of Aral, then decide where to go next, there will be direction in the future, instead of walking blindly in the desert states. Okay, there are friends like this. Yang Ting nodded with a smile, Brother Ye is a realm and needs to report. Second level heaven position, Ye Fusion said. He was now at the peak of the state. He felt that it would not be long and he might have a chance to step into the third position of heaven. Yang Ting didn't say anything. With Ye Fusion's age, this world is considered more talented, and certainly not the best. However, this is also the beginning of Ye Fusion's late training. Then I'll report to Brother Ye, Yang Ting said. I will go with you. Ye Fusion said. Brother Ye better go alone, Yang Ting nodded, and then the group walked out of the courtyard towards the open wine restaurant above the Bayou building. There were more people in the open restaurant than a few days ago. Yang Ting looked somewhere, but didn't see the people in Baiulu. Maybe something happened, we wait here. Yang Ting said. Ye Fusion nodded, ready to find a place to sit, but at this time Haifindiao had moved forward, and walked to a place, where there was a green eagle, and the black head of the black wind carving stared at the green eagle, with a hint of provocation. King Yan, who was provoked by the black wind eagle, let out a sharp and long sound, and let out a strong breath in his body. The surrounding people showed an interesting look, and some even whispered, this black wind carving is interesting. Those who tame, and those who don't know, think it's a golden winged rock. Many people in the wine shop spoke with a smile, and even raised their heads proudly in front of the green bird. This picture. The Haifeng statue has no self-knowledge. His eyes turned to Kang Yin, his eyes were lazy, and there was a jet black air flowing in the pupils, and King Ying was screaming constantly, and I didn't know what kind of stimulation he had. Master King Lan, Liu Lan's fire princess, frowned. He and the horse have the same thought, but he feels that the beast seems a little annoyed. Come back for me. Ye Fusion shouted. Haifindiao immediately got angry when he heard this voice, lowered his proud head and walked to Ye Fusion, who was sitting at the wine table, his head slumped to Ye Fusion. The wings are stiff. Ye Fusion knocked Haifindiao stubbornly. This is not spring. Ye Fusion looked at Liu Lan, who was a firefighter girl, and nodded slightly. Sorry. Your mountain is very brave. The fire maiden Liu Lan started, and an eagle dared to provoke the King dynasty. It's not just brave. The light green pheasant is a light green pheasant that master is not easy to obtain. Never seen the world. Ye Fusion said with a smile. Huonyu nodded gently, and said nothing. At this time, there was a rumbling sound at the edge of the restaurant, and many people looked down. It's a witch. The crowd was shocked, many restaurants were shocked, and then they headed to the side, looking down. Witches are here too. Yang Ting's eyes flashed. Master Witch. Ye Fusion was a little confused. This person surnamed Witch is a practitioner of magic. Magic is very powerful, her real name is unknown, so everyone calls her a witch. This person is very strange, very terrible, although only in the heaven realm, but already in Yun Yucheng he became famous and very strong. The four major powers want to invite him to join. He previously refused. This time he has to participate in the battle of the four major factions. Can he be ready to join the Yunyu Business League? Yang Ting was curious, then stood up. Let's go and see. Ye Fusion also stood up, walked to the side, and listened to Yang Ting's meaning. This mage should be the top Tianzhou figure in Yunyu city. I don't know how strong he is. Going to the edge of the ground and looking down, Ye Fusion saw a cloak. He could faintly see that this man was still very young, but his costume was a bit strange, just like his name. Shank Gongzi greets him personally. It is indeed a mage wizard. Someone said. A few from Shank Hair and Shank King and Bai Yulu greeted from below. No wonder people can't be found here, Yang Ting said. Not far from the void, there was a scream of sword gas, and the crowd turned, and they saw a figure walking along the sword, landing like lightning in front of the Bayou Tower, and glanced down, then slowly landed. The demon swordsman is missing, and he is here too. Many people showed shocked expressions. It seems that the battle between the four major factions will be very interesting this time, and the two have arrived. The mage wizards and magic sword masters are willing to help the Yunyu Business League, so the other three forces will definitely invite the evil spirit characters to shoot. It's Duan Ke, who is known as the demon swordsman. He has a mysterious and unpredictable sword technique, which is unpredictable and extremely powerful. The Yunyu Business League is indeed the richest of the four powers. Both men must take a shot. Spending a lot of money, Yang Ting said. Ye Fusion and his party look very calm. Everywhere there are famous characters in every place. Magicians are the dazzling people in Yunyu City. Brothers and sisters from Shanghai welcomed magicians and magic swordsmen into Bayou Tower, and they returned to their seats, still talking. Brother Ye, participating in the battle of the four great factions may be more dangerous than before, so be careful. Yang Ting said to Ye Fusion. The two have arrived, and he predicted that this battle would be very fierce. Okay. Ye Fusion nodded. After a while, the wine shop suddenly calmed down. Footsteps came from the stairs. Ye Fusion turned his eyes, and saw Shank Hair and Shank King brought the sorcerer and magic swordsman upstairs and found a good place to sit. Looks very polite. Behind them, several people from Bayulu came over, looked around, and when they saw Ye Fusion and his group, they lifted their feet and walked towards the side. Sorry, but a guest from Qiu Yueting? The man asked. Yes. Ye Fusion nodded. This young master, our Bayuloki is full, and for now, we only accept people who are willing to play for the Yunyu Business League, so I hope you can move. Sorry. The man said, frowning for the rest of his life, coldly. What do you mean? Yang Ting and Yang He also looked different, and just listen to Yang Ting say, "My friend is planning to register. Sorry, it's not accepted now." The man continued. Ye Fusion tapped his fingers on the table and glanced at the witch, and he naturally understood that it was because he had arrived with 2 new guests. Okay, let's go after drinking this wine. Ye Fusion didn't argue. Can you pack things in the yard now? What do you mean? Ye Fusion looked cold. You entered our courtyard. Bang. The rest of his life smashed the wine table and smashed the wine table directly. He looked at the person coldly. They're still living there, and someone else has gone in to pack their things. To make room for them. Many people looked at this side, and some sympathized with Ye Fusion. This is a normal thing. Bayu Loman, the sorcerer and the magic swordsman came, and of course someone had to make way. Shank Hair and Shank King came forward, came to this side, and looked at the rest of their lives. What do you mean, Your Majesty? You're asking me. The rest of his life spoke coldly. This thing is doing something wrong, but please understand, said Shank Hair. We have paid to stay in Lingxi for so many days, Lu Langxiu said coldly at this time. Back off. Shank Hair looked at Sioe, who seemed to be ready, and handed the bag to Ye Fusion. Is this enough? Ye Fusion said lightly. Are you looking for something? Shank Hair said lightly, and Shank Qingzhao beside him laughed. If it's not enough, it's still here. With that said, he stepped forward and sprinkled a bright spirit stone in front of Ye Fusion.